Welcome, everyone, to the C-Suite Sales and Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. Today, I guarantee we have a conversation that you are going to want to listen to. It is all about how to build a diversified portfolio of revenue. Think about it in our own lives, right? It's like we got all of our eggs in one basket. That is not a good place to be. So we have a fantastic Edan Gottlib is here with us, and you're a very seasoned CRO. And you have built time and time again a diversified revenue portfolio for your clients. And in fact, that's turned into a lot of growth from, you've been at small companies, big companies like Oracle and SAP. You've grown from 20 million to 140 million up to 400 million. You've had a lot of experience in this. So before we get into the particular subject matter here of how we develop that diversified revenue portfolio, I'd love to hear a little bit more your words about your background.
Well, thanks. First, you make me sound really, really good, so I really like it. But I've been around probably for 25 years or so, kind of in sales, revenue, leadership kind of things. If I kind of try to do the stat sheet stuff, I took two companies to a multi-billion-dollar valuations. So that's a run by its own. We've talked about revenue, and because it's not just sales to do that. As you mentioned, did the run from about a 20 million to about 150 twice now. Had one full kind of cycle of companies that started with a small startup, and we grew and did an IPO and then became another company and then sold to an Oracle at the end. So kind of the whole cycle of it. Got to work at public companies at venture-backed PEs and a couple of bootstraps as well. So I think I got kind of a good sense of everything. 400 million is probably the largest that I got to in terms of running revenue, as I mentioned, and had my own consulting firm for about 4 years where it was go-to-market strategy and execution, where we had at the beginning small companies and then larger companies that advise how do you set up to get a good set of revenue. And I think I had every function reporting to me here and there between, sales to marketing to customer success to revenue operations to demand gen to and partnerships, and goes on. So a good kind of mix, and part of our topic of discussion, which I really like here today, is that from all these experiences and activities, if I look back and I try to analyze and what are the formulas, what are those pillars that made the successful part successful and the pillars that were missing when we didn't, I think this diversified portfolio of revenue concept has been, as you mentioned, it's kind of a logical thing that you think about even when you make investments. But when it comes to sales and revenue, for some reason, we have all these things that hold us back and rules and things that cause us to not execute. So I'm excited to talk about this topic. It's a really, really, I think, good one.
Well, here's what I'm excited about. I'm sure when you had your consulting firm, you charged a pretty good price for that. And we're going to get it condensed down in about 25 minutes here. So
yes,
here's what I want to do. I want to start out with this whole concept of what is a diversified revenue portfolio, and then we'll break that down. How do we create that? So I think we know on the surface what a diversified revenue portfolio means, those words, but your concept far exceeds what we're thinking right now.
Yeah, so it really comes down to the basics of you want to have these different, sometimes I call it avenues for revenue that comes in, and you break it down by the size of. It's a combination of this price point and price range that you're going to get. And you can break it down anywhere between 4 to kind of 6 categories, and you cater to them differently. So you can start off with these, 3 to 4 figures, plays the 1,000 to 12, 20K revenue bandwidth that you have one. Sometimes you'll find people do it through self-service and product-led growth or inside sales. So you get a different configuration how to execute about them. We can talk about that later. But that's the first band of revenue. The second one is those 5-figure ones, right? The 20 to 80K-ish. Sometimes you'll find people call it their enterprise or their starter enterprise or their basic enterprise, but that's kind of that level of it. Then you get the enterprise ones, right? The ones that run the 6 figures, 100, probably all the way to like a 600 play. And then the 7 figures that starts probably at 800, close enough to 7, and then to the million. And so those are the 4. You sometimes get more nuances between it's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 kind of figures, but these are the lanes. And you establish this lane so as for to operate for each of them differently, because there's different cost of sales, different margin targets, a different volume, different operations that you do about it. But this is not how you do it, but what you do. What you do is you set those up. Now, the reason and the why behind it, and the much so important, is that it really allows you as the revenue leader. By the way, whether you're a CRO or a VP of sales, it doesn't matter. You have to continuously deliver the results.
Yeah.
And if you have a single point of revenue, markets will change your competition, economy, a lot of stuff will happen. And you say very much exposed to that kind of fluctuations. And if I look back and looked at every film that we had great performance, is that it was always being this different lanes because they balance each other. Sometimes one will go better, sometimes one will go worse. I think in our previous, chat that we've had, I gave the example, which was one of the most, I think, vivid one to look at, and it was during the COVID times. And when I was, running the revenue team on the COVID times, if you looked at the company, it was like we were growing, we're steadily growing, and you would think, well, this is great, and we're just riding the COVID kind of wave that was going on. But if you look under the hood, what really happened is before COVID, we've entered that period, we were very much into the, 5-figure kind of plays of the 20 to 60, 70K types of deals that we're running in good volume. But as COVID started, those actually died down. In our larger deals, 100 to 600Ks started to pitch in. And so that compensated for the lack of what's going on. And by the way, as we were exiting COVID, it rebalanced itself. So when you looked at the charts and you look at the aggregated one, it's like, oh, nice, great growth. When you looked under the hood, it was like, you could see the fluctuations between the lanes and how they were making it up for each other. And that really is been going. And if I look at all the different places that we had great success, this is what we've implemented and had in place that got us to do it.
So I got a burning question for you, right? So everything you just said, I'm like, okay, I get it. I get the concept. Here was my worry as I was listening to it, right? All these different lanes and everything. Does that mean I have all kinds of different ICPs that I have to cater to and have to have product to, and then customer success has to like cater to different stratuses? And it sounds like it could be like a nightmare, right? But no, it's not. Talk me down. How do you address that concern?
Well, it's an excellent point. I think this is one of the things that was in the way of people actually implementing it. Even when I started the first time when I was thinking about it, I had the same kind of objections. But I think the thing is that the ICP and the way you approach the ICP should be different. You're not going to go, here's what's going on, right? If you're a small company, even a mid one, you're going to get pressured by the board that you have to be focused, right? Pick the use case, focused, one ICP. You don't have the money, you don't have the bandwidth to go do it. When you get larger, you get to, hey, pick the ICPs that work and double down on them. So you're always going to have that constraint of like, Now, the mistake or the misconception is that if you build a diversified portfolio of revenue, you're going to get spread thin across different ICPs, but that's not true. You actually stay with the same ICP. The thing is that you have to build your ICP different. Regular ICP building construct really start with, here's my industry, here's my geos, here's my company sizes, and then start kind of building through that one. You have to build your ICP kind of from the bottom up and start with the use cases, because the use cases are the same use cases no matter what size of company or deal that you go for. If your use case is the same, you stay with that. And then you build, okay, this is my use cases, and this is the symptoms for the use case, and here are the problems, and here are the people. And now I go up to here are the geos that I play, and here are the industries. You're going to end up with the same stack, but your common theme and the focus is around the use case that you solve. I sometimes use the analogy of an airline to try and communicate that, because nobody will get married to a specific high-tech scenario. If you got a flight going from San Francisco to London, that's the use case, right? Now, you're going to have different level of service and different groups that you're going to cater to throughout that flight. You're going to have the economy, basic economy people. They just want something quick and dirty and just sit and don't eat. You want to have the people that are charging for some luxury, and some people want really high-end luxury. They fly business class, or in the European airlines, you can get it in first class. It's the same use case, but you have different people you cater to. And if you, by the way, look at the financials of the airlines, each flight gets balanced through these different avenues of revenue in order to be profitable. So the same goes here. Your marketing team doesn't have to freak out and say, I'm going to go about it. They say, if you start with the use case versus start with we are e-commerce that only sells in the Northeast, and then you're going to get yourself lost in trying to remap it to different use case.
Thank you for actually explaining that, because people who listen in often are probably going to be like, I've heard you say this before, Steve, but we remember things 22 times better when it's told to us in the form of a story, right? So that airline analogy, thank you, that makes so much. But now we got another kind of 60-minute style. Okay, but I got a question out of that, which is, that sounds like that could be the natural cross-sell upsell strategy, right? I wanted economy, but I got sold into business class, or right. How is that different, these lanes different than just the traditional upsell cross-sell strategy we have?
Yep. So a few comments I have about this. Is a good question. One, if you notice when I put the revenues, I didn't call them SAB, SMBs, or I tried to stay away from these words because it by itself already creates a different kind of construct. So that's point number one. Point number two, I would separate what we want to do versus how to do it. How to do it, there's a lot of different ways to, and a lot of different tactics and strategies of how do I get to the final result of how do I capture the value of my solution, software, product for my customers. So that upselling, crossing are just tactics to get to a certain point. And you can pick different one of them. But what you really want to be doing when you're looking at this is to look at two data points. One, where are these people are at now, right? If you think about the classes of service, right? And if I do the analogy for the high tech world, right? It's like you have these guys that have a tool, buying the tool. There's people that are buying a solution. There's people that are buying a platform, and there's people that are buying a standardized kind of a overall company-wide thing. So you got to figure out what they're trying to buy first and make sure that you cater to that. Second thing, you have to decide what is their potential. And now you can choose how to go about reaching the potential. You can do it first time. You could do it land and expand. You could do it with let's discuss about it and figure out how we get you to business class. Or you become a frequent flyer but the mix between the two get people confused. You really need to look at these guys and say, I'll put you on the right lane based on where you're at right now. If you're in the tool lane, if you just need a basic economy right now, because this is what you had to do, this is good. I'll start with you there. But if you're a guy who's looking for a certain level of service, and really the key word here is level of service, not necessarily how rich you are. A rich guy can buy a cheap ticket. And it's okay. I don't have to charge him business class because he's rich. And so that profile of the companies gets you confused versus say, okay, this is what they're looking for. Here's their potential. Now I can figure out which play I run based on how do I connect with them and where they're at, how to optimize it. The key words here really is that you want to stick with the value, right? The balance of the value, and you look at the potential. Then you figure out how you bridge the gap. You can start these small guys, these big guys as a small plan. You can start these small guys at a big plan. I had a few startups that spent a couple $1 million with us because in several companies, because we were critical infrastructure for them. And they bought this standardized platform for media, for instance.
Got it. Okay.
Some
good questions there. You were really good. I think you've got a future in podcasting. So tell me a little bit. I think you've gone through a couple of it. If you could just give us the shorthand version of that, there's like kind of the foundational pillars underneath this diversified revenue strategy. What's the shorthand version? Because I think you've articulated it through your answers here, but to summarize it for us.
So if I need to summarize it, I'll start with the basic pillar is these avenues of revenue. Define them for them. Your 4 figures, 5 figures, 6 figures, 7 figures, right? And kind of figure out what the lane is, and then you could later on build how you've executed against it. The second part is build it if use case is your thread. You start with the use case and you build on top of it as you get to your ICP. That would align everybody in the organization, including your marketing, including your CS, including everybody else into now we know what we're talking about. And so I think that's kind of the second. And the third one is you got to look at where your prospect or your customer is. We talked about what they're trying to buy, but we didn't talk about one more thing that is really important. We don't sell to a single individual anymore. We used to, and even that's where the whole analogies has their problems. In the airline situation, it's usually an individual making a decision. Here we live by committees, whether large or small. So the thing you have to add to that perspective is you need to have this 3 dimensions of players that you're going to be interacting with. One is kind of the technical one that cares for the technical aspect of your solution. One is the more functional ones, the people that usually manage this and run that certain sides of operations. And the third one is more the business executive, whatever kind of you want to call that category that cares about these outcomes. And again, this is the pitfall when you get into marketing and product marketing and try to, now I got to have this matrix of all these things. And you stick with your use case is now different. It's how you communicate to these people, the language, the value proposition that you want to be attuned with. Now, if you want a bonus one, and you really look at these now three, so now I got the color, right? I got the lanes. I understand kind of what they want to be doing. I know my use case. I have my three different kind of types of personas that I will be working with. The thing you have to think about for closing the deal or getting them to success is that throughout this process, they will try to mitigate risks. And they mitigate different risks at different level of plays. And so kind of when you bring them all together, there's going to be a little matrix of risks. And if you're effectively able to think about it and mitigate the risk for each of the players in kind of each of the situations, and now, no, you're talking about a 3x4 matrix. It's not an infinite one. But that will make you extremely efficient and effective executing kind of that diversified portfolio. And at the end of the day, by the way, it's not more effort than running a single one. It's just a little bit more sophisticated. It's not more work. You don't need to get to people a lot smarter. You don't need your product marketing to be 3 times as bigger. It's just being a little bit more sophisticated.
Well, and being a little more smarter about it, right? I mean, what you're saying, whether we want to think about it or not, there is different perspectives on the buying committee that we have to cater to, right? And what I love about that is, and how you kind of simplified that, but kept the power in it, was over the last 10, 15 years, the buying committee has grown by like 3 to 4 times, right? So we can get kind of freaked out, be like, oh my gosh, we got a buying committee of 15, 20 people now, right? But if you say, well, okay, but there's going to be like kind of the business people, like they're more financially oriented. There's going to be the more tech people, right? If you could just simplify it into those, those quadrants or, the 2 or 3 areas that you were talking about there, then all of a sudden you're like, okay, it doesn't seem as overwhelming, right? I know what I got to do. And that's what I'm taking away is like, okay, you're just giving us a formula for how do we think about this? How do we think about all the areas that we need all the way through risk? Because that's, if we don't think about the emotional reasons why people are going to say maybe 5 months, 8 months into the process, right? And you get that, this is great, this has been fantastic, but yeah, okay, I got the but, right? Usually that but has an emotional component to it. Well, but we've already got this tech in place and everybody's trained on it. And, I'd have to get IT involved. I have to get procurement involved, right? And I just think we're probably doing okay right now, right? What they're really telling you is, it looks like a big hassle. I don't want to take this on. I don't have enough time. I'm barely above water right now, right? I think those are the kind of things that you're talking about, right? Is like, what's the risk for them, and that emotional.
Well, if you drag me into, and I know it wasn't part of our scope, but if you drag me into a risk discussion,
yes,
there's really, if I super simplify it, there are 3 reasons you're going to get pushbacks, or 3 risks that people are trying to mitigate, no matter who they are and where they're buying. One risk is this is not, so the risk that this is just not going to work.
Yeah.
So that second one is I'm not going to use it. So I'm going to buy something and not going to use it. The third one is that I'm not really the person that can make a decision. So I need to go explain it to somebody else, and I don't want to, fail on it or look bad.
Yeah.
And so you got to always put whatever pushback you're going to get is going to fall into one of these 2 categories. And you got to develop your side of how do I mitigate these risks for these guys? You could say, hey, it's not going to work. Well, I got 10,000 customers. So it's going to, it's not going to work for you. Let's prove it before we do it. You can come up with a lot of how to mitigate a risk like this. You have to go to your boss. And by the way, this one is not, they're not going to tell you directly, going to get it in different ways. Nobody will admit I hate my boss unless they're, trying to push back on you. Then you say, hey, here's what we need to do. We need to present this case, and here's the case. Or what is the CFO needs to look at in order to approve it? And but really, it falls into these 3 categories. It's not going to work. I'm not going to use it. I have to go sell it to somebody else and then justify.
Again, you're simplifying the complex. I think that's a theme that I'm hearing throughout, right? Because we can get lost in the details and get overwhelmed in the details and what we are doing and what we're not doing. And so I love how every time I say something, you're like, okay, Steve, here's how you think about it. There's 3 risk factors.
And dragging me down that road, but yes.
Yeah. So there's also what you're calling like communication misconceptions about focus and market strategies. And all right, simplify that for us, like you've been doing so far along the way here.
I think in today's world, you have to provide value, right? And the value is really, really important. And value comes from the impact you're going to make. And it all comes back to use case, right? You got to figure out this is the use case that I care for. This is where I make an impact. And this is the value of my impact. Now, the broader your impact on the companies, the bigger the value, the bigger the price point you're going to capture on it. But it really starts from that. It starts from that core use case is your world. Everything should be driven from what is my use case. And if you look at even the formula I talked about, the diversified portfolio, right? The use case is the killer thing. Now, again, how? You can have use cases based on product, based on modules, based on feature. You could play around with how you want to deploy it. But you should be able to say, here's my use case. Here are the people, here's how their lives are going to look like. The technical route of it, the functional route of it, and then the executive is going to see it. It's that simple, but it's not that simple because you really have to. The funny thing here is that you can go to your customers, even some of your great customers, and ask them about that, and they wouldn't be able to tell you that very clearly. You have to go and extract it from what you hear from them in order to tell that back to them.
I do that with my teenage kids all the time.
Yes.
Right. That's kind of an analogy telling the story, right? It's deciphering what they really mean and in what they're really trying to say that they're not able to articulate. I love that. So tell me a little bit more about ICPs, because this is an area that I'm going to give you a stat that came out of a recent study. In terms of alignment on the definition of the ICP between marketing and sales, what % alignment is there across the industry? And it's at an alarming low rate. That % is 16%. A lot.
I was about to guess 12. Yes.
Oh my goodness. So, you talk about ICPs and you talk about use case based marketing. Having ultimately that definition of who it is that we're talking to and their pain points, right? How do you come into alignment? And you talked a bit about ICP, but it starts with use case based.
Use case. Yeah.
How do you think though that definition of the ICP and how important that is?
Well, I think I'll put percentages. 60% of the problem of this misalignment comes from how the organization is operating. You got probably at least 3, if not 4 or 5 groups fighting over their concept of the ICP. Right. You got marketing. In product-driven companies, you will have product. Then you'll have sales. And then you have at the peripheral, sometimes CX and partnerships with your own viewpoint. The simplest way to solve it, you told me I have to take complex things and make it simple.
Yes.
Choice number one, you have to decide what kind of a company you are. If you're a product-driven company, which most companies are, then product has to set the tone that we're building this for this kind of person to solve this use cases. And then marketing needs to pick that up, and product marketing needs to translate it into materials and components and the details and bring all the stats so we could communicate that to the market and enable the salespeople to execute. And salespeople just have to execute. That's the flow if you're a product-driven company, which is most of the companies out there. The tricky part becomes that it becomes this little bit of a pride of who determines what, and marketing comes up with their own concept. And so you have to set up that this is the hierarchy. And it comes, by the way, for 2 things. There's pride, and then there's also fear of taking responsibility if it's wrong. And so you have to balance it. So that's how it should work. It's hard to implement that many, many times. The worst happens, I'm saying it as a running sales for many years and running the revenue teams, which included marketing and everybody else, is to let sales decide. Sales is an execution function. They need to execute the plays that were decided and were thought about that this is the best way to go, engage with the market, progress the market. They are expert negotiators, connecting with people. They can read the situations. They're very, very talented individuals that themselves, but they shouldn't determine which plays we run and where do we focus on, because you will get the last thing they got, the word they had success with, could have been an accidental success. I was, walking down the street and I found a bill of $50. And so from now on, I only walk on, Montgomery Street because I know I can get $50 there. Has nothing to do with this, but this is what you're going to get as an input.
So
I think it's this.
On what you're saying here. You're saying most companies are product-led, right? Gartner has come out with studies, McKinsey's come out with studies that said the number one long-term sustainable way you build value as a company, the number one way that you differentiate yourself as a company in a age of rapid technological change, right? Where product features and benefits are no longer sustainable over time. right?
Mhm.
Where you have 20, 30 different competitors, the average company. So the low price leader, we don't want to be there usually, right? The bastions of competitive advantage between product and price are no longer what they used to be. So their perspective is that the number one long-term competitive advantage for companies today is the customer experience. I would love to ask, do you agree? Right?
Oh,
And if you do,
definitely.
why? And how does that then play into, how we develop these diversified revenue streams?
So first of all, I agree. I think that the whole world, when shifted into SaaS, moved to a service and a service level kind of a relationship from a product. Um, Product is still an important part of how the experience of what the experience is like, and it's important, but it's not the only thing. It's a critical one, because if your product sucks, it doesn't matter how great people are and how much you're going to do it. It's not going to help you. You're going to have a solid product. But I think they're right. I think you have to build this combination in order of go back to the airline once, right? You develop a relationship with an airline because hey, the flight was good, the food was good, they treated me well at the airport, I didn't have to pay for suitcases, I didn't get nickel and dime. So everything together comes into that your competitive advantage in terms of the market, because features are easy to catch up. I mean, nobody has you know, as much as you write patents and things like that. It's going to be limited in how much you can get to.
Right.
And he goes back to beautiful how you connected back to diversified revenue portfolio, because every one of those, you're going to have a different type of a level of service and a level of experience. And you want each of them to be extremely valuable. You don't want to say, hey, these guys only pay me 2K, so they're going to get the shitty treatment. No, you're going to develop this is how they're going to get a great experience. They come in frictionless, don't have to deal with legal and, instantly on and get a little check. Oh, we decide, a couple of companies we said, even our self-service customers, even our free users get live support, like an actual engineer that will help them. Because level of service was part of we wanted people to be connected to. So product is a pivotal thing. You will need to have it. That's why I think it's an important aspect. But you have to build it all together. This is kind of the how thing of like build each revenue lane to cater to the people and the use case that they are in and what they're trying to buy. Nobody will buy a standardized platform and a self-service platform. And so that's kind of how it all kind of connects together to this one part. But they're absolutely right. This is how you build the competitive advantage. By the way, competitive advantage you need not just to get the first deal, to stay in the account.
Yeah.
You have to have competitive advantage. It's a continuous fight, month over month. And larger companies try to protect themselves by doing 5 and 6 year deals, but it's a limited kind of a way to protect yourself. And people will buy themselves out and they go to negotiate out. So you have to have a great level of service.
Dig one level deeper on this.
Okay.
And the question
I'm ready.
So I was talking to a very smart CMO recently, 3-time B2B SaaS CMO. And he said, in order to sustain that competitive advantage, I have to know my customers better than my competition. I have to dig deeper with my customers, my ICP, my audience that we're selling to. If I understand them better than my competition, that fuels the experience that builds the competitive advantage. My point of view is that there is a high degree of familiarity with our ICP throughout the industry, that we talk to them every day, or we talk about them every day. We plan for them. We track them, right? We have a very high degree of familiarity, but I don't know that we spend a lot of time really talking to them. And a sales conversation can count, but it's guarded. There's a wall there, right?
Yep.
Customer success. Talk to them all the time. They're putting out fires, they're answering questions, and they're trying to cross-sell and upsell. The idea of a continual learning environment where we need to continually learn and talk to our customers and their peers that we're selling to. What's your point of view on that? And do we do a good job of that as an industry?
So I'll start with the second one. No, we don't do a good job. And yes, I absolutely think it's critical. One of the things I like to do for my teams is just book club. And every month or quarter, depends on how hungry and active is my team, I do a book club. And in my recent book club that I did in the recent company, I dug up an old one, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People.
Oh,
because I felt the fundamentals were missing there. And one of the fundamentals is first have to seek to understand before you understood.
yes.
And this is so critical because you have to truly understand it. And going back, I talked about the hierarchy earlier. When product marketing defines, or when product, not even product marketing, product defines what goes into the product, it has to come from a deep understanding of the customers. When customer success is, you talked about the different hows to do it. Customer events used to be this place where you come in and upsell to your customers and expose them to new features. And the way I did it probably in the last 5 years was the other way around. It was a place for them to come in and talk about their world and explain what they did. And really, I was half kidding because I would go on stage and say, hey, during this period, I am prevented from selling you guys anything. So you guys can come to me. I cannot sell you anything. Because the point of the customer group meeting was for us to talk and for you to talk to each other, for us to listen. And those conversations between themselves actually got us the most insights. This is part of how you build your competitive advantage. I think connects to when I talk about use case, it's just you have to truly understand what everybody does. Yeah. I'll give you one quick short story. It was a few years ago. I was working for a company who were selling quality type of supply chain management type of a system for quality. And we're part of the guys that we're selling to was for the automotive industry. And recall and parts per million, there's all these kind of problems there. What I do when I join a company, I like to go and meet the customers and see their world. So I had to go and travel throughout the Midwest and get to all these manufacturing places. And the consistent theme was that the guy that uses the most, right? You go down, he sits usually in the basement in a room with no windows, somewhere on the manufacturing floor, and he's in charge to collect on all the materials and their defects. And this is their world. It's like this dark, walled room that they're, trying to, and the feeling that we talked about feeling users that they're most missing is to feel like they have control over it. It's a constant mess and craziness. And that was our big pivot. We started talking about this one gives you control of the chaos. And the value prop is not going to take the chaos away. The chaos is going to be there. At least you're going to have to be able to control the chaos and organize it. This is chaos A, this is chaos B. That completely changed the trajectory of our film. But you had to truly understand that this is their lives. And they were not even seeking to get rid of the chaos. They were just trying to organize it. And those things are so critical. By the way, I think COVID a little bit got us even more further away from our customers because you don't get it in Zoom. You have to go there, you have to smell the floor, and you have to see where they're at and go to the room with no AC. And it's either very cold in the winter or very chill in the summer. And you just got to go through that to truly understand it. And to some extent, that's product and product marketing. And they're the ones that's supposed to translate it to the company.
I want to talk for another couple hours because this is so fun. I want to ask you one last question, and it's going to be really hard. I would say 95% of the guests that come into this podcast don't answer the question right. Okay. Because I'm going to ask you from everything that we've talked about here, what's the one single most important takeaway from our conversation that we should all be leaving with? And the reason why everybody gets it wrong is because they want to say like 3, 4, 5, right? But if you said, what's the one thing that we should really be taking away from here, what would that be?
I think we'll go back to the beginning, and it's this diversified portfolio of revenue. You got to diversify, and there's details behind them, and it really helps you cover the entire gambit we talked about and to be effectively running all of it. But as things will fluctuate on you, and they will, again, whether you're just running sales or you're running the whole revenue organization, and things will happen, competition, markets. The only way to truly continuously deliver to what the board is expecting you to do it, or your management, or even what you want to do and be successful, is to have this diversification to help you overcome these different changes. By the way, the rate of change is only expediting right now. What used to be taking long, you say, oh, it takes 2-3 years to build this. You don't. You have 6 months. You really have to put these in place. So if I'll say one, I'll say this. If I'll say one and I'll try to sneak in 3, I will say three. That the different revenue lanes combined with your ICP starts at the use case, and think about the fact that you got functional and technical and business people to cater to, and that will be your game.
I love it. If there are people that have additional questions, which I know there will be, is it okay if we give out a link to your LinkedIn profile so people can reach you?
Oh yeah. By all means. And, I had a few folks that I had chats with them challenge me and challenge each other about how you cannot always create multiple avenues of revenue. So I could challenge everybody that if they can't, I could easily find them how they could do it.
All right. Well, that's a good offer. Thank you. Thank you, Edan, for being here and just expanding our minds in terms of how we think about creating growth through diversified revenue lanes. Fascinating stuff. I appreciate you coming on.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I enjoyed it a lot. It's a topic that I enjoy. I just have fun and we're just having coffee and having a chat.